You know, if you follow the news at all, we know what happened with Alec Baldwin. We know what happened with the shooting that took place on set, except we maybe don't know all the details yet. Chris Whatley is the founder, owner of Lagniappe Productions, somebody who, well, Chris produces Wild West gunfight shows, and we want to talk to him a little bit about what happened or how something like this could happen. Chris, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Oh, thanks, Joel. Happy to be here.
You know, obviously, you know what it's like to be around guns, to be around weapons. I do too. I mean, I own more guns than I'm ever going to use. Some are collectors, some are good old-fashioned hunting guns. But, you know, just being around guns doesn't intimidate people like you and I. Others sometimes don't know how to use them. So when you're on a set like this, how easy is it for something as tragic as this to happen?
Well, unfortunately, it's often too easy, but at the same time, not that easy. Normally, if protocols are followed, this won't happen. That's why they've successfully made literally tens of thousands of movies without anything like this occurring. In my opinion, Joel, the number one mistake, live ammunition, and for people who aren't familiar, live ammunition that has a projectile should never have been within miles of that set. Should never have been allowed.
Well, and I can't imagine it was. I just, for the life of me, can't imagine it was. There's certain things that I do every time I pick up a gun. I check to see if it's loaded. I check to see if there's one in the chamber. I check to see what type of round is in there. Some of the people that star in these movies or participate in the movies, it doesn't surprise me that they don't do something like that because they're not around guns like you and I are. And so, great point on the fact that live rounds shouldn't be there. But shouldn't gun safety be part of the training before anybody even gets to put one in their hand?
Well, absolutely. And to your point, Joel, Alec Baldwin has done several Westerns. He's not a stranger to an 1873 single-action Colt revolver. But the protocol on a movie set normally is you have your armorer. They are responsible for the inventory and the loading and the management of the firearms. Then those are dealt out accordingly as needed. What we've learned in the last 24 hours that was rumored about 48 hours ago, but confirmed, was that on this particular set, they had a young and inexperienced armorer, and between setting up for shoots, they were actually taking those same firearms that were going to be used in the next shot. And when they weren't active with them, they would go out in the afternoon and do target shooting. Now, that's unfathomable to me. There never should have been a live round within miles of that set. It should not have been allowed. And to that point, years ago, I had a fellow show up on set, and he had taken the liberty to put some live rounds. He was just an extra. He put some live rounds in his belt because he thought it would look authentic. And I fired him. I sent him home. We were done. He was gone. And Joel, you know, a live round, a 45 caliber long Colt with a 230 grain lead, it has a much different look than a short crimp blank that the end of the blank is crimped. And you have to load those guns one bullet at a time. Mm-hmm. There's no way anyone with experience could pick up a live round and mistake it for a blank. Mm-hmm. I believe what happened is they were sloppy and they had been target practicing and they did not unload one of the guns, and it ended up getting sent to Alec Baldwin.
I want to make sure people understand what you just said by saying a live round has to be loaded one round at a time. Explain that to people, the sheer mechanics of that Colt. Walk people through it if you would.
Well, the 1873 Colt 45 single action means that you have to cock the hammer back every time before you can fire it. And the action of cocking the hammer back rotates the cylinder. The cylinder holds 6 rounds. Every time you cock the hammer, a round moves in position, the cylinder rotates clockwise. Once it's been fired and all the cylinders have been spent, you unload it by opening the loading gate, dropping out 1 bullet at a time. Well, the opposite is for loading it. You have to take 1 bullet at a time. It has to be facing the right direction, and you have to slide it into the cylinder and then rotate that cylinder to put the next bullet in. So you consciously have to look at and touch every single bullet, one at a time. How is it even conceivable that somebody would pick up a live round, which looks very different, a live round being much longer and having a lead in the end, etc., that you would pick that up and load it in a gun thinking it was a blank? That's why in my world, and I'm only speculating, Joel, but I believe they were sloppy. A, they should not have had live rounds in the first place. B, the fact that they had them and did target shooting and then came back and there was a live round that got left in one of the guns is a testament to how sloppy that actually was. And I believe they just didn't check. And they, Joel, another thing, I've done several large stunt shows. We produce shows for major amusement parks as well. We have what we call a triple redundant system. So when we load a pistol, when the armorer or the weapons master loads a pistol, when he hands it off to someone to take and give to a performer, when he hands it to that person, they check it in front of the armorer before they walk away to make sure the armorer did his job. Before they hand it, even though they just checked it and they're walking 30 feet over there, before they hand it to the performer, they recheck it in front of the performer and give it to them. That you cannot check it too many times.
Yeah. That just, everything you said is, first off, it's right, clearly. It's a great protocol, but it's common sense. One of the things that I saw that was the most ridiculous in my life, and I was a high school student, and I actually saw a teacher do this. And the teacher had never been around weapons, didn't understand weapons. He felt, and he knew, he actually did know that there was a blank in a pistol, and it was a firing weapon for starting track meets, is what it is. And
right.
He didn't even have an understanding that if I'm within a foot, 2 feet of you, there's going to be fire coming out of the end of that pistol, that you can damage someone even with a blank. And Chris, I think people don't understand even what a blank is yet today.
Most of the, for people who don't understand ballistic, when you make a blank, you're actually loading the casing, the shell, with several times more gunpowder than what you load into an actual bullet that has a projectile. The reason for that, you get the huge sound of a gunfire from a live round because of the resistance of the projectile. You don't have that resistance with a blank. So you put enough gunpowder in to create an explosive noise. Because of that, at a close proximity, if you're close to the barrel, a blank is not only harmful, it can be deadly. You can kill somebody with a blank. Luckily, the blast will dissipate very rapidly. So with this, and I'm talking right now about a Colt 45, long Colt, like they had on the show. A long Colt 45 at about 10 to 12 feet, if you have clothes on and you're not being shot in the face, you're perfectly safe. The blank is not going to hurt you. But at close range, a few inches, it will rip your skin open. and depending on what part of your body, it could potentially kill you.
Yeah. And I think that that's another example of what people don't understand about weapons. Obviously, tragedy. You know, Chris, you're not going to be in charge of how this all shakes out, but, you know, it's in the end still an accident. It's not a murder. It's ignorance that goes along with it. But will you be shocked if you see charges filed?
I will be shocked if there are criminal charges, because I believe there was no malice, and that's really the heartbreak of it. It was so preventable, and it was such a waste of an amazing young woman, Helena Hutchins, and Joel being injured, and of course the guilt that Alec, I'm sure, feels over this whole thing. I won't be surprised, though, if there are civil charges or civil suits, you know, but I don't believe there'll be criminal.
Did you know her?
No, I did not.
I mean, in the world that you live in, you know, and we see that here coming from the West. You know, North Dakota sees ourselves, you know, West River. I mean, I've been out to Theodore Roosevelt Park where there's been staged, acted out gunfights, you know, never once worried about it. Never once. Well, again, I'll still have my grandkids there because of exactly what you just said, Chris. I hope we don't lose that in all this.
I don't want to lose it either, Joel. But interestingly enough, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, I do live productions, not only for amusement parks, but I have 2 traveling Wild West shows that go to major fairs all over the country. I own a dinner theater that's 1880s theme, and we use guns in the dinner theater. I do 300 corporate events a year. We do a lot of shows, okay? And we travel to festivals all over the country as well. And this has happened more than you would imagine. And in fact, just south of you in South Dakota, Hill City, South Dakota, in 2011, a group of reenactors doing a performance at a festival. One of them had not unloaded his gun after having 5 rounds in it. And when it came time for the shootout, shot 3 people in the audience. Oh. That was in 2011. It happened in Cody, Wyoming in 2016 with the Cody gunfighters that do the show by the Irma Hotel, shot 3 people in the audience. In 2006, it happened in a small amusement park in New Jersey called Wild West City. And one of the performers shot a fellow performer. They were using .22s, shot him in the forehead, did not kill him, but he's a paraplegic. And then in 2017, I believe it was, they had resurrected an old amusement park called Ghost Town in the Sky. That's in Maggie Valley, North Carolina. And when they brought it back to life, it had been closed for 10 plus years. When they reopened it the very first season, the guy in charge of the shootout in the street was shot in the leg with a rifle, a .44-40, by one of his own men. Okay?
Yeah.
And I see this happen, and it usually happens when people who don't have the level of professionalism that is really necessary to keep a show of that nature safe. But there have been, and unfortunately, in Hill City, South Dakota, the 3 people that were shot in the audience, nobody died. Same thing in Cody, Wyoming, nobody died. The worst injury was the gentleman at the amusement park in 2006, who's a quadriplegic.
Yeah. Chris, the world needs more of you. And again, I just hope we don't lose the art and the, you know, what you bring to it. So hopefully somebody learned from what you just said. Thank you for coming down the road with us. I appreciate it.
Joel, thank you so much for having me. God bless.